Hello everyone, my name is Johnny5 and welcome to the second video in my class interview series. This video will be covering Awakening Sorceress and I will be interviewing Yisuni and Zachary for it. This video's goal is to help people learn about other classes, whether you're wanting to re-roll, try a new class, or maybe just wanting to learn a bit more about it. We'll be going over a range of subjects for the class such as playstyle, strengths, shortcomings, and more, so hopefully you'll be able to learn a few new things as I sure did. I'll have background footage and gameplay in the video as well, but it's very relaxed, so if you would like to put it in the background to grind, work, or play another game even, this would work fantastic for that. With that said though, let's dive right into the video. Hello everyone, my name is Johnny5 and today I'm going to be interviewing some Awakening Sorcs. My first one that I'm going to be interviewing today is Yisuni. He's a very good Awakening Sorc. I've seen a lot of videos of his gameplay. I've seen a lot of montages with him included. How are you doing today, Yisuni?
I'm doing great. Just chilling on some WoW.
Just chilling. Um, so how long have you been playing Awakening Sorc for?
I've been playing Awakening Sorc for around 2 years now. Started like right before reworks came out, I guess.
All right.
A couple months
Um,
before that.
and then before we dive into the initial interview questions, is there anything you want to kind of bring up or talk about before?
Um, I just want to note that like potentially people aren't aware because there was a situation with my account. But I was the sorceress with awakening sorceress with the best win rate on the Solaire leaderboard by a mile, and I think that's pretty impressive considering awakening Sorc does not have that much agency in Solaire, but I think that's my most notable achievement currently.
Awesome. It's good to have players who definitely know their stuff. And if you're climbing the AOS leaderboards, especially on something that's not necessarily the best for the game type, it's going to allow you to bring a lot of experience and knowledge for the class.
Yep.
But moving on to the questions to start off with mechanical difficulty stuff, is the class dependent on mouse movement? Do you have to do it to succeed on the class? Is it needed at all, or is it somewhere in between where sometimes it can help or uh, not so much?
So for Awakening Sorc, mouse movement is completely unnecessary. You could become the best player in the entire game on the class without ever pressing control on your keyboard. That said, though, there definitely are like niche advanced things that you can take advantage of if you learn how to use mouse movement on her. Particularly in 1v1s, I don't think I ever mouse move in 1vx situations, but in 1v1s, there are little niche interactions that you can take advantage of. And if you really want to push the limits of your gameplay, you can delve into it, but you don't need to.
All right. And then for uncapped content, whether it be T4 Node Wars or GVGs or open world PvP or even BA, is the class gear dependent? Do you need specific sets of gear? Can you go DR, evasion, both? And is it something that can be viable if you have a lot of AP and maybe not so much DP, or do you need to be giga juiced to be even able to play the class at all?
Yeah, so currently, and I think for a while actually, but not so much before, I think there is a relatively solid misconception that Sorc does not need gear. While Sorc is a very good class at punching up and fighting targets that are more geared than you, it is very limited in the way that it can use its kit if you don't have gear. Sorc is one of the few classes that is very strong on both evasion and DR, but especially if you're playing DR, if you are lacking in DP, you are very limited in what you are able to do. So I think it's pretty common that people will like heavily invest in AP and then focus on their DP because I mean we have lots of iframes, right? And you can avoid damage. But you'll find it's very difficult to commit to any of the targets that you CC if you don't have DP. So Sorc is a class where almost all, I mean, basically all, because like the only frontal damage you have is on a skill that does no damage at all. All your damage is SA, and it's very stationary. So when you're committing to kills, you will find that if you are not very smart about where you're positioning and how often you're committing to those kills, you will die very quickly. Um, so in my opinion, I think like Sorc really starts to flourish at like 401 DR, which sounds like kind of late game, but like I said, you can punch up, you can be below that DR bracket, but like your main heavy hitting damage skills become way more valuable and way more applicable when you have access to that DP. In regards to like how much AP you need and like switching up builds and so on and so forth, I think Sorc can be relatively versatile in the sense of damage because um she has lots of like combo potential to extend combos and so on and so forth. So if you are an evasion build and you're doing a little less damage, you can still get those kills off. And if you're a DR build and you have like high accuracy or high human damage, so versus those DR targets that you don't need the accuracy for, you can blow them up pretty quickly. And Sorc actually does have great AP scaling and will hit high evasion targets very hard if you have upwards of 900, 1000 accuracy in the later game.
Hmm. All right. And then moving off to gear, if somebody is new to the game, they're not a veteran player, is the class something that you might recommend to a new player that is interested in maybe the play style, the aesthetic of the class, or whatever it may be? Or would you recommend that they try other classes before playing Sorc?
So personally, I actually think Sorc is probably one of the better classes to start playing the game on because it has a very nice dynamic where its skill floor is relatively low and you can get good results out of it early on and find a lot of enjoyment. But the class at a high end, when trying to like push mastery curves and really push the limits of the class, you'll always feel like you have something else to learn. Even now, like I feel like there's still more things that I can practice and hone and refine. Like every time that I like take a break from the game and I come back, it feels like there's new stuff to learn that the meta has shifted in ways that like you need to play your class differently. So as a new player, looking to pick up Sorc, you can find lots of success in most areas of the game, very early on with very simple gameplay. But if you want a class that like can push your limits mechanically, like the way you macro think about things, Sorc will definitely be a class that as you learn more and more about it, you can still feel that sense of like new things to learn. And for me personally, even after 2 years of playing the game like very actively, I always feel like there's something new that I can learn, something new that I can push my limits on, and it always feels like Sork has the tools in her kit to deal with every scenario presented to her.
Okay. It sounds like it's definitely one of the better classes to jump onto, because if you want to keep on it the whole way, you can continue to master it, continue to get better, which is always rewarding,
For
to be able
sure.
to keep pushing your limits on a class. For the class Sorc, Awakening specifically again, is it hard on the hands, whether in PvP or in PvE? Is it something like Ninja, where after an hour of grinding you want to go lay down because your hands hurt, or is it fairly relaxed or in between?
Um, I would say at least in grinding, it is definitely less APM than Ninja. Most of the time, because my alt class is Ninja, so I am like pretty well versed on like how Ninja feels in grinding. Um, it's probably like a little bit less than Ninja because you, especially on Awakening, you're just violation spamming a lot of the time. Um, and I don't think after 1 hour you'll need to feel like you need to take a break, but it's definitely on the higher end of like the overall classes. Um, in PvP, for sure, though, it is very high APM. I have tested a lot of classes, and I'm tempted to say that Sorc might be the highest APM class in the game if you're really pushing the limits on it. It's not necessary, though, especially as a beginner. And if you have lots of AP, it definitely lowers the APM. Um, and you can play the class at like a more simple level. more calm, more passive, and it should be easier on your hands. But most people that I've played the class for a while and are committed to it, I think almost all of them would agree that after a while it starts to wear on your hands.
Okay. Um, and then why did you pick Sorc or Awake? Why did you? I guess I should ask: is it your first class, or did you re-roll to it?
So, initially I picked up Ninja, and this was before. So actually, I said at the beginning that I started before reworks. I meant I had started before Successions. So when I first started playing BDO, I played the game purely PvE. I spent about like a couple months, I'm not sure exactly, just purely PvEing, and I played Ninja, and Ninja was so terrible in PvE, and I was like, okay, it's time for me to reroll because this shit was terrible. And I looked at the other classes, saw edgy Scythe Girl, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna play this. And once once I got on it, I was just like instantly addicted because the class feels slightly awkward at first. It feels awkward to move around on. It feels like you can't have the fluidity that you might have on, like, say, like you pick up Zerker and you do your double giant leap, lava piercer, and you're just flying all over the screen and you have very simple movement. But that awkwardness attracted me in the sense that it allowed me to feel like I had something to work towards. And once I figured it out, oh my, it felt so fluid. And it felt like especially with the spammable iframes on the class, your repositions, you can infinitely reposition, so you can take and you can pick and choose whichever types of fights you want to take. It feels like you have a lot of freedom on the class. So the aesthetic I love, the potential I love, because a lot of aspects of the game where other classes might necessarily be locked out in a sense, where they feel like, oh, I can't approach this type of content, I can't approach this type of fight. It feels like Sorc really can contend in all aspects of the game, and she feels really good in almost every aspect of the game. So I think a lot of people find on their class incentives to reroll here and there. Um, and I have rerolled off Sorc a couple times. Not hard rerolled, but like I tagged a class and I played it for a couple months. But every time I reach like a skill cap on that class, and I'm like, damn, if I was on Sorc right now, I wouldn't feel like that because like I said, even now, I still feel like there's more and more to learn on Sorc than any other class that I've touched. Um, and it really is. I really want to drill it home on that. It really is the class that if you understand what you're doing, there is not a scenario in the game, the whole game, where you feel like you have no power over your situation. If you really know what you're doing, you can deal with every task thrown your way.
That's definitely got to feel good to know
Yeah,
that you're never losing because your class just isn't capable of doing it. It's something that you could have done better on.
exactly,
And with that,
exactly. It
that means
always
that you
feels
can
like
always
I could have played
improve,
better.
and next time is the time.
Hmm.
Wow, I didn't know that much about the class, so that's a little bit that's informational for even for me, and I've been playing for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Moving on from that into other scenarios of game content. For Node Wars capped and uncapped, if you had to put Awakening Sorc in a place as of today, S being broken and needs tuned down, A being very good, B being pretty alright, C tier being not great, D tier being pretty bad, and F tier unplayable, where would you put it for the various capped and uncapped Node Wars?
I would put Sorc at like high A tier, like A plus, right below breaching into S tier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the reason why I wouldn't put it in S tier is purely because of movement. So in Node War, Sorc is extremely reliant on your horse. Like it's crazy. Certain Node Wars, like higher tier Node Wars versus better guilds, the pace of the fight is so fast that your class truly cannot keep up with it. If you're walking on foot with your main ball and you are approaching a ball, sometimes the fight is over before you can even get to it. sometimes you don't have stamina by the time you get to the fight, and then sometimes the fight is over and you're the last one alive, and it's like, well, shit, everybody's died. I need a reset and I need to be with my team, but you're still alive because you're a Sorc, and you kind of feel out of position. So a lot of the times, it is very important to keep your horse alive. And if you can keep your horse alive and use it to maneuver around the map and follow your ball more, um, you'll be fine. But that's the only reason why I wouldn't say it's S tier. But if you can like be at every fight, it's extremely strong. Um, it's a great disruptor. Um, it has almost no problems killing people if you have the gear required. So in cap content, like people being evasion heavy is not a problem. Um, in uncapped content, if you have the enough of the gear, then you can basically blow up every class in the game, other than like DP memes. Um, so like I said, Sorc is the type of class where basically any type of scenario thrown your way, if you know how to deal with it, you can deal with it and have great success.
All right. And then continuing into that with Node Wars. In Node Wars, what kind of a role do you play? You mentioned that it's a disruptor. Is its primary job to sit on the edge of the ball and CC, throw damage in? What would you recommend a new player look for if they were to pick up? I guess a new Sorc to look for, rather, whether they're a veteran or a new player, to try to do during a Node War, to their goal in a ball fight, kind of a thing.
So Sorc is most definitely like an assassin type class, but it's not so linear in the way that you would think most assassins would be playing, where it's like go for a flank, look for kills on the back line, try and not die, be sneaky, essentially like a ninja and stealth engaging. Sorc's assassin role can be very flexible. So as a new player, I would focus on like kind of just taking flanks and then going into the ball, using all of your skills when you're low on skills, disengaging and rinse and repeating. Because Sorc has a lot of tools that allows her to stall fights, reset fights, um, basically turn the fight in a way that's advantageous to her. Um, so as a new player, I would just go on flex initially, and it if you have a flex shot caller telling you what to do around the node war, that should help you micromanage like the smaller things that you might not have the full awareness for yet. But as you gain more awareness, the class flourishes. You have like multiple different rules. So as I started to say, was like disruptor, staller, like you can truly completely disrupt pre-engages, regroups and pre-engages. So like when my shot caller is calling for a dive from our main ball, I try and engage before they actually finish the call, because I can be in there and I can be safely in there before anybody else. And if I can disrupt their backline and their casters, it seriously affects a main ball push. Potentially stopping PAs, potentially stopping heals, even just the range damage that's pew-pewing on everybody is really cancer to deal with. And if you can stop that, it really helps your team in ways that they might not even acknowledge. Um, Sorc actually truly can be played as a very solo class in Node War. I've tried being on flex and on main ball, and both times I found that just playing around myself and playing for myself seems to be the best way to play. You can truly go into a ball all on your own and then hide in Nightmare, which Nightmare and then it's Flow Requiem. You can be in it for 10 whole seconds. So imagine being able to just sit in essentially spectator tool, and just sit in the middle of the ball and just scope out the whole fight. It's actually a crazy tool that I think is extremely undervalued. And you can just pick and choose wherever you want to go, which fights you want to take, which sides of the ball you want to disrupt. And if you can assassinate a caster, an archer, a ranger, things like that, on your way out, you have super high value to your main ball.
All right. And then any final things for Node Wars or anything like that before we move on to AOS?
I would say that if you are doing uncapped node wars on Sorc, it's very important to have the gear for it. The punching up really is more of a like skirmishy type advantage. In Node War, when you have a swarm of people around you, you're not going to be able to use Karshian's Nightmare ever. Um, when you're in Grim, you cock that Grim back, you get blown up. You can't sit in any of your SA skills. So, and if you don't have the AP to obliterate people in like a skill or two, you will be a sitting duck for too long and eventually either get burned out of your stamina um, and die, or which is something that I forgot to go over, is the people will just opt to ignore you sometimes, and if you don't have enough threat, they can just completely ignore you and you will feel very useless. So at least in uncapped, make sure you have the gear. In capped node wars, Sorc is amazing in almost every form of capped node war. T1, T2, T3, Siege, every form of capped content she feels very good in. Once again, make sure you keep your horse alive. But other than that, she feels very strong in all forms of cap content.
All right. Um, for AOS, you talked about it earlier in the interview that Awakened Sword currently isn't the strongest AOS class. Do you think you could easily get within the top 100 or even the top 20 or 10 if you're good enough on the class, if you continue to push the rankings? Or do you think it's not quite what AOS needs due to maybe the damage or 3v3 setups or what is currently meta?
Yeah, so unfortunately, AOS is Sorc's probably worst content. There there's a lot of problems with Sorc in Solaire, and even you'll even find that like people opt for Succession just simply because it's more slippery and has more reliable damage. Um, Awakening Sorc in Solaire is mainly a support DPS. Now, this makes it fall into a lack of agency role. So essentially, you're a disruptor that relies on everybody else. So a big problem with Sorc is if you don't, and I alluded to this earlier, if you don't have enough threat or enough basically damage, because that's the main thing that your class provides. If you don't have enough damage or threat, people can ignore you. And this creates a problem where classes like Warrior, Valkyrie, Striker, etc., just classes that can stay super protected in one spot and just essentially look at you like a glorified mosquito, um, they can ignore you and you can't do anything about it. So you're kind of reliant on whether or not you get a team with grabs, because Sorc is definitely a lot stronger if you have two grab classes on your team. But if you load into that AOS match and you see a Meiwa on your left and a DK on your right, you're not in for the most fun time. Um, the class is very reliant on like the map buffs, like the AP map buffs and your E buff, Z buff. Those times you have about enough damage to have threat, and something that is a bit of a caveat is Karshian's Nightmare does amazing damage in Solaire. The problem is when you have people who are like actively paying attention in a 3v3 setting, it's very hard to get off. You can almost never get it off unless you are confident that the opponent's grabs are down, like you saw them use them, you're tracking them, you know they're down, or the opponents in front of you or near you are CC'd. And then you can do a lot of damage with that skill. But having a class where your damage is essentially loaded only into one skill is pretty unreliable. Um, it's very hard to get CCs on people because you have no damage pressure. So unless they feel pressured for other reasons, Certain classes will not be forced to give you any gaps at all. Um, it just feels like a class that really lacks an agency because of how low the damage is in Solaire in general. And then you have random classes that just one-shot you for no reason. The AP scaling in Solaire doesn't really make much sense, but for Sorc for sure, it's rough. Now, with that said, I will say that I think the line that needs to be very careful that PA needs to be very careful about is if Sorc has too much damage, she becomes probably, if not the most broken class in that game mode. So part of me thinks it's a healthy weakness. I want to be a biased player and be like, my class isn't strong enough and she needs more damage, which she does, but not too much. Because you give it too much, and then Sort can 1v3 teams and completely ignore all the other like concepts that need to be paid attention to in Solaire. So there's definitely like a knife's edge that needs to be danced on there. Um, and I do believe even in its current state, you can reach like probably mid like 50s on the top 100 ladder, and I haven't seen, and personally like this is no shots to anyone. I haven't seen any other Sorcs like have that great of success. And if I was able to queue more, which unfortunately I was not because of IRL reasons, um, I believe I would have gotten a lot higher on the leaderboard and potentially pushed past like top 50s. But there's plenty of great Sorcs all around the world, and they all were queuing Solaire, and not many people were able to get past like even like the 80s of the ladder. So you can get top 100 for sure. And I think if you're really proficient on the class, you can push farther. But it's not going to be a cakewalk. You're definitely going to have to grind the games. You're probably going to end up with like a 55, 60% win rate. And slowly have to grind your way up there. But I don't think the class is useless. I just think that it's very reliant on comp right now because of how little agency she has.
All right. And coming from a Warriors POV and AOS, I didn't get to do too much of season 2, but I played a lot more in season 1. The glorified mosquito is definitely true, at least for AOS, but as that class gets the more damage, like you talked about in other forms of content, T1, T2, T3, T4, it is a very, very different matchup,
Yeah, very
especially in the
different.
1v1.
I was gonna talk about when we got to
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we'll get onto that part eventually too, but yeah, it definitely it definitely like felt like a glorified mosquito in that super low damage situation. But we'll move on from that into open world GVGs. You talked about one of the main crutches or handicaps of Sorc being its movement. Do you find it to be a good open world class, a good GVG class, or do you find that the lack of movement is too much to make open world and GVGs enjoyable?
So it's actually quite the opposite. I think open world and GVGs is probably its best form of content. I think this is where Sorc is strongest because Sorc actually, if you do have the gear like required for it, because I personally do believe that it is a heavily gear dependent class. Um, if you have the gear required, most of the time you don't have to run all the way from north to south, from Africa to the US. Like you don't got to do that. When you're just respawning on node and fighting in the same small area over and over again, you're probably never even needing to mount up on your horse. So this creates like artificially all the not artificially, naturally it creates all the types of fights that Sorc thrives in 1v2s, 1v3s, small 5v5 skirmishes, 10v10 and below. Like that is where Sorc feels extremely strong, especially when you don't have to cover those large distances. In larger DVGs it can get a little rough for sure, but in those smaller scale fights, she's super strong. And when she has the damage available to her, because that's basically the main point that I'm making with all my statements is once you reach a certain damage threshold on this class, she becomes God. Like actually, she becomes God, and she can do whatever she wants. Um, as long as you reach that damage threshold where you can pressure people out of SA, pressure people out of block, and force them into making mistakes, you can do whatever you want. And open world GVGs, this type of content is the best for her. She takes the smaller skirmishes. You pull people off on the side. They're dumb enough to go for the 1v3 on the Sorc. They all fall flat on their face. And there's not much that most people can really do about it. If they have enough gear to be very tanky and just sit in front of you in SA and then look for a grab, it's very rough to deal with. But if you have enough damage to pressure them, then you're very strong. And that's basically like the whole epitome of the class.
All right. And then moving on from PvP into PvE for a little bit. Do you think the class is good at PvE? This includes low, mid, and high end spots, as if it's a first time player, they might have to grind some of the newer places like centaurs or bodices, polys, and then moving through the ranks into like orcs, eventually doing things like hex and underground Gyphon.
So, starting with lower end PvE, Sorc is kind of in like this weird spot where it's like, okay, you have violation spam, which when mobs die at like one hit essentially, it's very strong because you just spam the spinny skill, you move around like a Beyblade, and you kill everything just fine. But the problem is in a low end setting, a lot of the times you're moving around a lot because you're killing the pack so quickly, and her pack to pack is definitely not the greatest. So at centaurs, for instance, you'll find you'll run out of stamina, your movement is too slow to keep up with going at pack to pack the speed at like say a Succession Zerker, a Musa, a Valkyrie, all these classes that can just zoom through all the packs and hit them one time, keep zooming and have no problems. So if you're at a spot where you can one shot the mobs and it's a relatively tight area, like I would say like Kratuga for instance is like a pretty good example. Um, those spots are very nice on lower end areas for Sorc. But if you have to move very far, for instance, centaurs, you'll find that you'll probably have better success on another class. Um, did you want to say something?
No, I don't have too much. I mean, I've never grinded on Sorc, and I think I've only had a Sorc as my PvE partner one time before. So, I had absolutely no idea what you were going to say before we dove into that.
All right, okay. Um, then on mid tier spots, I believe it's probably like above average. Like when you're around like Zakkary, Star's End, things like that, like Thornwood, so on and so forth. I, I don't know if is Jade considered an high end spot at this point.
I
It
would put
feels
it
kind
at like mid-ish.
mid, yeah, okay. Um, mid tier spots, I would say it's above average for sure. Um, I'm not gonna say it's like crazy or anything, but it's above average. And this is where I'll delve into Succession a little bit because I do PvE on Succession sometimes. I think they're both very equal. Some spots Succession is better, some spots Awakening is better, but I think she's above average at those spots. Like you usually don't have to move around too much at those spots. And the damage on both specs is pretty decent. It's nothing insane though. Now high end though, I think this is where a lot of people might be surprised on my opinion on this, and this is where we get into like the hand braking thing. Is if you really are
Hmm.
sweating on Sorc and grinding and high end, you can push numbers. The class can do pretty well. Now, I would say it's in the like same spot as what I was talking about with Node Wars, where it's like on that A plus tier, not necessarily S for you you kind of have to do like a full combo to get great damage on her. You can't do like a couple skills and be fine. No, you have to fully pre-buff, fully debuff, and then you can get your great damage off. So spots where like the mobs are a bit more tanky, like Hex and Gyphons and Trolls, um, she's very nice there. She feels really good. Not in that S tier where you're like pushing like really, really insane numbers, but I see people getting like 12 to 14 at Gyfin pretty consistently when they're tryharding. 20k at Hex on both Succession and Awakening. Um, that's on yellow with Agris and stuff. Um, so I would say she's above average for sure, and on the higher end spots, she's pushing into the better classes. But there are definitely some better classes if you're looking for the best of the best PvE grinder that will outperform her. But just like I said with the PvP section, where when every task is thrown at you, you feel like you can deal with it. In PvE, you shouldn't feel obligated to reroll to another class. She can do pretty damn well in most grinding.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, after you completed the early game spots, I have no idea, or had no idea. I knew most people don't usually talk about Sorc when it comes to PvE or grinding as like one of the big boys, like you might with Succession, Striker, Lawn, Hash, Sage, etc. So I wasn't
Usa
quite
Megu.
sure what to expect, but I did know that Succession Sword can do Ash while having Tavala gear, so I definitely didn't know what to expect for Awakening. Diving
Yeah.
back into PvP though, for 3v3 tournaments, so AOA, how does the class match up? This is obviously much different than AOS due to it being either trials or real gear. But is 3v3s a place where Sorc can really thrive in if somebody wants to be a tournament guy, tournament focus, tournament class? Um, yeah, what's your thoughts on the 3v3 tournaments,
So
specifically in Arena of Varsha?
so yeah, I have like a decent amount of experience in Arena Varsha. I've done a lot of scrims and I've done a couple tournaments. Always coming in second place to Belly because that guy's a rat. But it is strong where it needs to be strong. So here's the problem. It can be ignored. The map is large enough that it can essentially be ignored and have no value unless you have very specific comps. So Sorc is really strong in AoA for its ability to 1v3 because always in AoA, 1v3, you have 1v3 threat. Every time that I'm the last person alive, I am attempting to 1v3 the team. I don't just fall over because there's just no chance. You always have the threat to actually win that 1v3. Unfortunately, I feel like it doesn't create the best like player or viewer experience because they can look kind of boring where like the fights last just a whole 2 minutes of the Sorc trying to 1v3 the team and then the enemy team is doing everything they can to not let them do anything. You have enough damage to pressure people, but not so much that you have like super serious threat. So it still is a problem where people just sit in their Q block, where people just sit in their SA lingers, and they can slow you up and damage trade you because in Arena of Arsha you are also quite squishy. Most people are squishy, but funnily enough, with your recent tournament and the new crystals, tankiness has been mixed up a bit, but I think I think if you are just pure trials, then the damage and the squishiness is like fine. But with the new crystals now, the damage is not enough to force people to do things. So that leads me into just people seriously just sitting there, like actually just sitting there, completely ignoring interacting with you, and they try and run out the clock. So, back to talking about the compositions that you need, you kind of need classes that want to sit there with you because if they are running around the map, you can't keep up. You really cannot keep up. The pace of AoA is very fast. Um, when you have your E buff up, you're very scary, and your E buff is extremely strong. But outside of that, people really can't ignore you, and the fights tend to turn into 2v3s for your team if they're not classes that can just sit on you. So Sorc wants to play with like a Valk, a Striker, a Mystic, even a Suck Nova, caster, classes that want to stay in a smaller area and fight in that smaller area. Classes that want to run about, Suck Ninja, Zerker, Nova, Drac, etc. Um, those classes kind of have anti-synergy with her. And same role that I talked about in Solaire, where she's basically a damage support. Um, she kind of just waits for her teammates to get CCs, runs up, KDs them because you can't KD. I mean, you can't V KDs unless in the little knockup portion, but you want to secure a KD so your enemies have a harder time Ving. Um, and then you drop your very reliable damage because she is some of the most reliable damage, if not the most reliable damage, in so not in Solaire, AOA, and you just drop your SA damage, and usually you can secure a kill. The problem is, once again, she doesn't necessarily have the agency to create those instances herself. Now, if you have a team that you can sit on, um, your weakness of having only damage threat and not really great CCs to peel people because you don't have a grab, um, is kind of alleviated. So if you can sit on your team and your team plays for the CCs, you're always in range to re-CC and drop your reliable damage. If your teammates get CC'd, you're always in range to damage pressure the opponents, and you don't have to waste movement skills to potentially either not be at the fight or have no skills when you're in the fight, and it makes it a lot better. Now, if you can have those ideal comps, then she'll probably feel pretty good. I would again put her in like around an A plus tier. I think Sorc is at a point in most forms of content where she feels really strong, and for the opponents it feels really annoying to fight her. But if you can take away the spots where she is strong in, not fight her in her element, for instance, um she kind of becomes the glorified mosquito again that you can just ignore. So that's how I feel about AoA.
Okay. It's I know a lot of classes talk about AoA being one of the smaller maps, especially in comparison to AOS, and it not being big enough. Archers are the prime example of this, of saying that they need more room for movement.
Hmm.
Same with even a few others like Musa. So to hear Sorc say that it's too big, I think definitely shows the mobility differences between it and other classes, at least in the large
Sure.
scale, or the long distance kind of things, and the differences between the best sprinter long distance class and the worst sprinter class um, is definitely very large right now. So I wonder if they'll end up changing that in the future. But moving on from AOAs into 1v1, something that we briefly talked about earlier in the interview. How is Sorc in 1v1s? Is this something you really enjoy to bring into BA, or enjoy 1v1ing for spots DFS? Or what's your thoughts on it?
Okay, so this is the spot that I'm excited to talk about because this is where I would say my specialty lies. I would say I am very, very like well rehearsed on Sork's like potential and where it stands in 1v1. This is like my main form of content now. All I basically do is 1v1s. I used to do 1vx a lot, but personally for me, it's just not the thing that I'm the most interested in. Sorc, like I have been saying this whole time, is a class where everything that is thrown your way, you have an answer to. So if you have enough skill and enough time, which time is a very important thing in matchups, because certain matchups, if they are going to be quick fights, you can't win them. And certain fights that are going to be long fights, you can't win them, and vice versa, where it's like sometimes you want the fight to be short and you'll win it, but if it goes too long, then you'll lose it, and the other way around as well. So, Sorc honestly has about 50% win rate with almost all of its matchups. Matchups that people would think are really difficult, like Warrior, for instance. Since you have Warrior, I have a lot of knowledge on the Warrior matchup, and you're a Warrior player, so this will be great to make an analogy with. Um, this matchup is like very close to 50-50. I would say it's slightly warrior favored. But this matchup changes heavily dependent on multiple factors. So if the Sorc does not have enough damage to pressure the warrior's block, it can easily become an 80-20 matchup in the warrior's favor. Now, if Sorc does, has enough damage, if not too much damage, to instantly blow up the warrior's block, it can easily become an 80-20 matchup in the Sorc's favor. So I think that dynamic where those thresholds are breached of do I have enough damage? Do I have too much damage? Do I have enough damage? Do I have too little damage? Really affects almost all of her matchups and completely changes the dynamic of the fight. But if we're on equal gear, I have enough damage to pressure you, you have enough damage to pressure me. Most of her matchups are around 50-50. Um, I'm curious what you think about the Warrior and Sorc matchup.
I would say that's pretty spot on. For something like Trials, it's slightly in warrior favor, maybe 60-40. But I would say it's about even there, especially after these recent warrior changes. I would say it's a little bit in warrior favor. For something like T2s where the damage is extremely high, or certain scenarios in T4s, it becomes a lot more Sorc favored, as the Q block is less relevant in both it breaks easier and you can get behind the class, and then back down to AOS where the damage isn't very high. It becomes very, very warrior favored because it lets us
Hmm.
buy our time until we get a CC. Or
Exactly.
if the Sorc runs out of stamina, depending on the player. But yeah, I would say you hit the nail on the head with the matchup there.
Yep. Okay. So then now we can take that type of concept and apply it to basically every other matchup. There are two matchups that I would say are like so Suck Ninja, for instance, is very, in my opinion, heavily Sorc favored. It's like 60-40 Sorc favor, or 70-30 Sorc favor. The reason why I say very, very heavy, even though, um, okay, this is kind of niche. So Ninja has a lot of tools to outplay its opponents in the same way that Sorc does. But Sorc has a type of play style that makes it very hard for any class to do anything to it at all, which is the zero risk, no unprotected anything thrown, and you stall for time. This is why I said matchups can heavily depend on, like I talked about the damage thresholds, but the time that you have to fight the opponent. If you need to make this fight quick, certain matchups are really rough. So Ninja, for instance, is a fight where you can run the ninja out of stamina and you can provide them absolutely no ways to deal with you. And you just burn them out of their gas tank and they will run out before you and you just win. A lot of the things that they want to do to you are very punishable. Stomp, grab, moonlight, behead, so on and so forth. I could go on forever because they have so many unprotected gaps. And as they try to do things to you, you have so many safe counters to them. Um, it makes it very rough for the Suck Ninja to do anything. Um, that said, on the flip side, we have a class called Awakening Ranger that is extremely difficult for us to do anything to, because if if you have a lot of damage, it can become easier, but even with a lot of damage, Ranger is essentially, and this is where I'm gonna definitely turn some heads. Ranger is essentially a better Sorc in almost every way other than SA damage. Um, I think it can rotate better. I think it has more reliable CCs that are less risky. I think its grab is one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game, only in contention with like basically Tamer. Um, and you can try and SA trade it and force gaps out of it, but it doesn't really have many gaps. Like it's got Blasting Gust, it's got Grab, and it's got C Swap, which it doesn't have to give to you if it doesn't want to, and it has plenty of iframes to avoid your very telegraphed damage. So now to broaden it to the other matchups, because I can't sit here and talk about every single matchup. There's so many classes in BDO. Um, if you have enough damage, that might be nice, but getting your damage off versus good players can be very rough.
Hmm.
Her damage is very telegraphed. Obviously, when you're going into Grim, you cock it back, you gotta charge it, you're stationary. You can iframe out of it and cancel it, but then you lose your Grim cooldown and a lot of your SA threat. And then her other SA skills like Swirling and Soul Reaper, very grabbable as well. You can cancel out of them, but again, if I want to, excuse me, get full damage off on my opponent, I have to put myself at risk, and it leaves me open to being grabbed. That's why I think Sorc's matchups are like very 50-50 because you have to put yourself in spots where you are at risk of being punished. If I want to leap stinger somebody's back or nightmare somebody's back, I am unprotected in that time. It is also relatively telegraphed and very punishable, but I have quick, nice CC options. So I have tools that if I am prepared for opponents' gaps to be shown to me, I can punish them whenever. But it also leaves me vulnerable, and that's the cycle. Back and forth, back and forth. It leaves me vulnerable. I can punish you. Maybe you can punish me, and that's the mind game. That's why we live around like 50-50 on most of our matchups. Um, One matchup that I would like to talk about specifically that I think is a heavy misconception and should branch off into other matchups as well is Suck Nova. So people think that Suck Nova is a awful matchup because obviously she just sits in block and she's full SA the whole time and she has like one gap, which is her grab. Um, but again, if you have enough damage, then it's very rough for her because how is she going to CC you? You blow her up, you break her block, and sometimes you can even completely ignore the block entirely and just go behind her and kill her standing. Um, and just always be hitting her back, which is full SA. And I could go on and on and on and on about her Sorc and her matchups because I think this is by far the part of the game that keeps me addicted to the class. Just always trying to figure out how can I push the limits of my class? How can I make it so this 50-50 matchup is now a 60-40 or a 70-30 because I'm better than my opponent and I really know what I'm doing and I really know what's going on and I can force the matchups into 60-40, 70-30, 80-20 if I'm really pushing it. Just because when you really know what you're doing, this class can do whatever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any final notes? Otherwise, I have one question remaining.
um, I I think there are a couple misconceptions that I think are important to address because a lot of people in the community have this perspective that Sorc is either broken or, if they're thinking objectively, is very annoying to fight. And the latter, I think, is very true. It is a class that is not that enjoyable to fight. But when you consider her weaknesses and the options that you have, I think it's important for people to consider, hey man, I just don't have to fight this Sorc right now if I don't want to, and just run the other way. And then what can I do about it? Nothing.
Nothing.
And then go ahead.
No, exactly. I was just agreeing. Nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Like nothing. Like sometimes you don't have the tools to deal with the situation, which is kind of contradictory with what I'm saying, but that's then the fight's at a stalemate and it's like whatever. So you're still not losing, but you just stalemated. Um, I think it's important for people to acknowledge that Sorc might be a very annoying class, but if you take the time, if you seriously take the time to go into BA, maybe log on the class, try it out yourself, and figure out what it does and where it's vulnerable, you'll find that fighting it is not that bad, and you'll find that it may be annoying, but it's actually not that difficult to fight it. It's truly not that difficult to fight it. It has very vulnerable opportunities where it's unprotected. It has very vulnerable opportunities where it's able to be grabbed, and you can checkmate the Sorc into options that other classes have available to them that the Sorc doesn't, purely because of grab. So all I would say to everybody is try and educate yourself a little bit more on what Sorcs can do, and you'll probably end up finding that the class is a lot more fun to fight for you, rather than annoying.
Yeah, one of the biggest things with a lot of the kits, Suck Nova, Sorc, Kuno, and fighting them, from my experience, is learning the kit is the best way to make the fight more enjoyable, one, and
Mhm,
two, more realistic.
mhm,
You can protect
that's true.
yourself and CC them when they do have gaps or they do have opportunities. And Sorc is definitely one of those things where if you don't know when those opportunities are based on the skills, you're going to have a really, really rough time.
For
But it's
sure.
also the case of if both the Sorc and yourself on whatever class you may be playing both know their stuff, you can have some good fights with it. I've had some good 1v1s where it's not just me sitting in the Q block and them infinitely iframing, but we're doing trades. They're throwing an SA and I'm trying to CC them or chip damage or
Warrior's
whatever
one of
it
my
may
favorite
be.
matchups.
Yeah, it definitely can be a fun matchup depending on who I'm fighting.
Mhm.
And obviously the level of skill I was in the various fights throughout my time playing the game. All right. And then the next question, um, for Awakened Sorc, what do you think the class needs to succeed in terms of something to give it? And then to also keep it from being too overtuned, broken, overpowered, whatever you want to say. What do you think they should and then take away from the class? Or even in the way it current stands, do you think there's anything they need to take away from the class?
Yeah, so with reworks, I think it really pushed Sorc over that edge of like this is really obnoxious to fight. And I think in certain areas it definitely can be broken. So when I talk about like fighting it in its element, when you fight it in where it's strong, um, it feels very and when she can't fight in those spots, she feels really bad. I actually have a clip from Divios that I can send you where he talks about saying Sorc feels like God that can't touch anybody, essentially. Um, you have all this power, and if you can't hit anyone, you can't use it. So, what she needs to succeed, I wouldn't say that she needs more movement. I actually think it's a healthy weakness. But the problem is when she's in her element spots, she has certain weaknesses that I think can become vulnerabilities and strengths. So, for instance, with the rework, she gained a lot of SA. She gained and a little bit before the rework as well. She gained Soul Reaper and she gained Grimbon and she gained Swirling, which are three main SA damage skills. While these are all SA and it's great to have protected damage, the lack of frontals is kind of a negative, I think, for the game as a whole. I think if they made swirling a frontal or just looked at giving her frontal damage in general, like maybe potentially Grim Bond, because without the Bond, well, core on English. Grim core makes the swing of Grim, not the charge, SA, because the charge is naturally SA, and then the swing is naturally unprotected. If they made the swing frontal, it would allow Sorc to have more vulnerability so people can look to CC her more, but it also would allow her to have better damage trading. Um, and I think this is a nice trade-off for like the overall quality of the game. Um, Sorc, as I talked about previously, is a nice class for punching up, but when the fights get too big, no matter how good you are at the class, you can't stop range damage from all directions blowing you up. There's nothing you can do about it. Excuse me. Sorry. And unfortunately, I think most people find the class is just not fun to fight because she's full SA and they're spamming their CCs in her general direction because they haven't really taken the time to learn the kit and the timings because Sorc is vulnerable, but at very specific timings. It's not a class that like you could just throw stuff at and get lucky. You probably won't ever beat a Sorc that way. Um, so another problem with the rework is that they made her awakening iframe, which used to be 2 seconds cooldown. Now it's 1 second. And it may not seem that crazy, but there are so many interactions and animation locks that made it so the Sorc is just less vulnerable, and it made the players feel less rewarded for understanding the lockouts and timings and so on and so forth. So I think that would definitely be a way to nerf her because I truly believe it's overpowered. That right now, all of her awakening skills that are like grabbable or damage tradable can easily be canceled on a whim. I think that is too powerful. I think being forced into certain locks makes it so she has counterplay, and it makes it more fun to play versus her, and it makes it more rewarding for the player to feel like we're taking risks and getting away with them, and that feels good. Another problem is that they increase the duration of Nightmare and they decrease the cooldowns of a lot of our skills. So I think even Nightmare as well, the cooldown of the skill went too low. So I believe Imminent Doom or Dream of Doom was like 20 plus seconds before, and now it's like 18, and a bunch of other cooldowns also got lowered. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but when you're a class like Sorc that can truly do iframe skill, iframe skill, iframe skill, iframe skill, and then you have your skills by the time you reach the end of the skill chain, of like all the tools available to you, your first ones are starting to come back up. I don't think that's healthy. I think there should be downtime for the class. I think that um, she should have points of vulnerability within her kit where her cooldowns are down, she doesn't have many options available to her, and it becomes easier to pressure her out of stamina. She can't really do things. It would allow people to have just more agency towards the class. And then back to the nightmare thing, where I think anyone who's had the experience of fighting a Sorc, you get them low on HP, you feel like they're low on stamina, and they go hide in Nightmare for 10 seconds is not fun for anyone to play versus. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think both of those sound very good from at least the warrior POV. It's very annoying, and part of this is I assume the ping disparity and the desync in the game. Finding opportunities against the
Hmm.
Sorc is very challenging because even if I want to do something like grab Grim or grab Crows, they can iframe out of it, and Grim is one of the most
Hmm.
dangerous coin flip things because if I try to grab the Grim and it doesn't work because of timing, the iframe properly, or desync, then I immediately get KD'd and I'm probably gonna die.
Exactly. Hmm.
And then the nightmare thing is another thing. Oh, I've been SA trading this Sorc. I won the duel for the chip damage, and then they just nightmare for I don't know how long you said. I think it was
You can
eight
hold it for
seconds.
10 seconds.
10
10
seconds.
seconds.
Yeah, 10
Yes.
seconds. And then they
Five
blink
seconds,
back
then you
into
become
existence.
unprotected. Five more.
Okay. Yeah, they oh, it's unprotected. Okay, I'm gonna abuse that then.
Yeah, on the exit, it's
Protected.
unprotected.
Yeah. Come out and then going back into
Five
it
seconds again.
occasionally is very
Exactly.
rough. I know I got a clip a while back of spearing one immediately because a lot of the less um uh, the Sorcs who aren't as good are very very the same. They play it the same. It's
Exactly. Yep.
repetitious. I know
Rotate all
exactly how
their
they're gonna
skills,
play.
go hide in Nightmare, buy time for my skills to be up again, because this is the problem with having your skills be very low cooldown, is when you have skills that are very low cooldown and you have a
Hmm.
skill that lets you stall for free for 10 seconds, you can use all of your skills, have be only using the skills that have like no threat, like no chance of being CC'd, fully protected, and then hide in Nightmare, and then use them all over again.
Hmm.
And I think that's just not healthy and not fun for both sides. It does. I don't think it feels good to play. I don't think it feels good to play versus. I dual sorks myself, even though I am a sork. I dual sorks myself. When I pressure them out of all their cooldowns and they go hide for 10 seconds, nobody feels good about that. It's like, man, I just did all this work and they just get to reset the fight for free? Like,
Hmm.
it doesn't feel good for anybody. Plus, it would also incentivize Sorcs to, instead of using their Nightmare defensively and sitting in it for such a long time, that you actually go into Nightmare and use the CC portion of it. You teleport behind your enemy, you use the block jump, you try and CC with it, you make yourself vulnerable, you go for more aggressive options, there's more outplay on both sides of the fight. I think it just feels better and healthier for everybody. Um, and then, like I said, really lowering I mean, increasing the cooldowns on the class, like basically of like the main CCs, like DOD, Eruption, Ignition. Um, it's just and Nightmare. Those are the main ones. Um, if they're too low, it just makes it so Sorc can just spam them indiscriminately and buy time with what either their stamina, Nightmare, quick disengage, come back to the fight, have them all back up again. Um, not much room for other classes to breathe, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That's
I
that's
I think
basically
if
all I
you
got.
change some of those things too, then you could also buff Sork in other ways by making it,
Exactly.
able to run more than 10 feet forward without running out of things to do. So definitely a give and take on that. But any final notes on what you think should be removed or added to Sork to help with it, or is that summarize it pretty well, you think?
I think that's pretty much all. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right.
Oh, wait. Sorry, one more thing. One more thing.
Okay.
Um, with the rework as well, they made it so, and I'm actually gonna preface this because not all people are very like fully aware of how this works. So on Sorc, you have a thing called shards. It's your resource. You have 40 of them. It costs 10 to use an iframe when you are like on 0 stamina. So if I have 0 stamina, and you'll see Sorcs like this, and people will be like, "Wow, she's moving around so much and she has no stamina," and they're like, "Sorc has no stamina issues." Um, no, we have stam issues, and you do have to manage stamina. And in order to do that, it's very difficult to keep iframing while on 0 stamina. But what they did with the rework is they made it so all of your pre-awakening spells, which is where you get shards from. Almost none of the awakening ones give shards. They give you a bunch more shards. So like before, if a skill gave you 3, it gives you 8 now, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of little like specific things. But all you need to know is if I'm hitting you with pre-awakening spells, I'm getting shards. And before, you needed to like truly hit someone a couple times to gain an iframe. Now you hit them with DOD, it gives them like 30 shards. You hit them with like 2 or 3 pre-awakening skills, you have another 30 shards, and you just keep iframing around. Shard management was one of the like main things that would dictate like a Sorc skill level. It was rewarding. It allowed you to feel good about like playing properly, and it was balanced. It was a way to delve deeper into your gas tank and actually like continue playing purely based off proper and good play. But now it's spam skills in the direction of the opponent. I get to keep iframing forever, and I don't think that feels good on either end. Once again, just changes that just don't feel good to play versus, and they don't feel that rewarding to play as well.
Okay. Yeah, the joke that I know a lot of people say is, "Oh yeah, Sork is it has stamina management. That's for sure. I can definitely feel that on my end fighting it." And
Yeah.
you can tell the difference between those who are brand new to the class and those who have played it for at least a couple hours and can manage the shards. So, yeah. Anything else to wrap up for that part?
I believe we're good. I think that's it. Yep.
All right, awesome. But to wrap everything up, the last question: if you had to pick one costume, what is your favorite, and what would you wear?
My one costume that I would wear would be the snowflake outfit. It's a winter seasonal outfit. Sork does not have that great of outfits. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think her outfits are that great. The whole Grim Reaper vibe is completely lost, and she's like a dainty oracle. I don't even know really what to call it. She has like these really I don't know, just goofy outfits in my opinion. I don't think that they really strike the hardcore, edgy, like death vibe that a lot of people are looking for when they play a scythe class.
Hmm.
And this outfit, when you dye it fully black from behind, it looks so sick. You have like a cape or like a I don't know exactly what it's called that goes over your back, and you look like a Grim Reaper, and that's the aesthetic that I think a lot of people are drawn toward when playing Sorc, and unfortunately, they haven't really hit the mark on most of her outfits for that.
Leave it to the seasonal outfit to end up being the best one for being like a Grim Reaper.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but yeah. Thank you for interviewing with me. It's been good. I
My
even
pleasure.
learned a lot with this, so hopefully everyone watching did as well.
I'm glad.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up all the questions. Thank you once again for interviewing with me. If you would like to watch or catch more content from Yisuni himself, you can catch him on twitch.tv/Yisuni or his YouTube, which I will have linked below. Thank you once again for interviewing with me. Hopefully it was fun.
Yep. My pleasure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny5, and welcome to the second part of the interview today. For the second part of the interview for Awakening Sorc, I'm going to be interviewing Zachary. He's a well-known streamer, player in the community, and a very, very good Sorc. I've fought him many times. I've seen him in several tournaments, and I guess hopefully we'll get some more info from today's interview. How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm good. How you doing?
Pretty good myself. So just to kind of start off, how long have you been playing Awakened Sorc?
So I've been on Sorc for it'll be 3 years now. I've been making. I think I dropped my first montage on Sorceress, 3 years of April. Yeah, as of April, I think 17th or something like that.
Damn. Okay, that's actually a pretty long time. Um, just jumping into the questions right away for some of the mechanical difficulty stuff. Is the class, in your opinion, dependent on mouse movement?
No, no, mouse movement's not a priority at all in the class, except for like niche outplays or some cool clips like stuff you can do with leap and stinger and stuff like that. But nothing that's necessary.
All right. And then for gear dependence, is this a class that is very dependent on gear? Is it something that if you have 309 AP and a low amount of DP, you can get away with, such as some range classes? Do you have to go evasion? Do you need a DP set, or is it DR and standard? What's the gear like for the class?
So either set's viable. So you can go DR or evasion. The big question is the class gear reliant or gear dependent? And it definitely is in this meta. We are a melee class, so it's not a range class. So most of our damage is going to be front loaded, and it's going to be on. It's going to be all within melee range. So if you don't have gear in order to trade, we you're going to need it. So we also don't have a grab. So trading is a huge priority for us. So we can't really challenge or pressure without breaking a block or doing back attack damage or just being in somebody's face. So
Okay. And then if somebody is wanting to pick up their very first class for the game, or one of their first classes is trying to find whatever they really like, is Sorc a class you would recommend to beginners?
I do think it's a beginner friendly class. It's a class that does have like very easy combos to pick up for PvP, and its PvE is very easy as well. Um, for Awakening. It does have a high skill ceiling, so it has a lot of growth there for a player. It has a lot of skill expression, so if somebody does pick it up and they fall in love with it, like they have a lot of room to grow. It's not something they're gonna feel like they've been playing the same way for years on it.
Okay. And then for the beginner friendliness of it, whether a veteran player or a new player, are the combos something that it's mechanically very difficult, or do they tend to flow quite well into each other? It tends to be more flowy. I don't know if there's a better word for flowy, but more intrinsic, or is it something that's a bit clunky?
So for combos specifically on Sorc, a lot of the damage is heavily loaded into Awakening, and majority of the skills flow into each other. So there's super simple cancels and stuff like that, or it's just like a simple LMB or RMB after a certain skill. So it makes it very easy. Um, there are better combos or more options for you to like front load more damage or to add more damage in for a filler, or to just get more off depending on how tanky somebody is, and that's where things get like a little more intricate and difficult and higher APM. But as far as like simplicity goes, like there's definitely options. They buff so much damage in like an Awakening for Grim, and for Swirling that it just yeah, class is pretty simple for cookie cutter.
Okay. And then for PvE and PvP, is the class going to be hard on your hands? If you play for several hours a day, are you going to be walking away from your keyboard, maybe having to stretch your hands quite a bit, or maybe even with a little bit of, my hands kind of hurt from today, I need to take a rest? Or is it something that's a little bit less impactful on the hands when it comes to how much APM you have?
So I've personally never had an issue. I've been playing this class pretty much for the entirety of 3 years, both grinding on it and PvPing on it until recently, like the last like 3 to 6 months. And I've never had any issues on my wrists or anything. So and I've broken both my wrists prior. So but I have had other people complain about it and say that it's hard on the hands and this and that. So I think it's to each their own. It is a higher APM class if you want to be competitive in PvE, as well as like get some snazzy combos off in PvP. But I don't think any of it's like I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad on your hands. It's not like you're not gonna play like a Succession Ninja and feel like your hands are gonna hurt after. So
Okay. And then why did you start playing Sorc? I mean, for the most part, I would assume most people would know you as a Sorc player. I've seen you in a few other classes, but what has really kept you on Sorc or made you really like the class and stick to it for 3 years, like you said you've been on it?
When I first started playing, I played Awakening Kuno, and I ran into a sorcerer's player. I can't remember his name now, but he used to make YouTube videos. And I remember him 1vxing King of All Sands and a few other people. And I remember watching King of All Sands stream, and it was just crazy seeing like one person take down like 5, 6, 7, 8 people. Uh, and so since then, I've just kind of been hooked on the class. It's got a high skill ceiling. It's got a lot of options for outplay. It's got a lot of skill expression. Like you can see it, and if you watch different montages of sorts, like you can see people who have maybe been on the class for a little bit or who have put a lot of time into it. Uh, and then also it is the 1vx class. So like if you want to play a class that is going to excel in 1vx, it's going to excel under pressure in those situations where you're fighting like 10, 12 people. Like this is the class. So and it has a scythe.
And
I
it
love
has a
Reaper Vive,
scythe.
so and
I
it has a
mean,
scythe, yeah.
the aesthetic's always a big thing. It's why I originally picked warrior. Large sword go burr. So, um,
Plus the because the class has never been, like, nerfed, and it's always been in a good spot, and it's always an annoying class to fight, I feel like it's got, like, this toxic, vibe about it, and I fuck with
mhm.
it, so
Yeah. All right. Jumping into different game scenarios for Node Wars, capped and uncapped T1s through T4s. Um, do you think the class is in a very good spot? If you had to rate it from S tier to F tier, S being broken, overtuned, needing an obvious nerf, A being very, very good, B being pretty all right, C being okay, D being pretty bad, and F being absolutely awful. Where would you put it on the list? And um, what kind of a role does it play as well in Node Wars?
So I think from in all content, I think it's an A tier class. We are in a heavily ranged meta, right? But because of the iframes and because of the role that the class is able to play, like it makes it very easy to do well on it. It's a flanker and a skirmisher. Like that's probably the biggest thing. It also plays really really well in a flex role. Uh, it the only place that the class really struggles with is like let's say you're in a main ball play and you're trying to keep up with the main blob. Like it can't do that. It cannot follow main ball. And it doesn't do well like chasing opponents or stuff like that. But it's really strong on pre-engages, really strong on like causing distress, causing disruption, causing chaos at bases, protecting cannons, stuff like that. So
All right. All right. And then moving on from Node Wars for AOS itself, you said you would put Awakening Sorc in A tier for all content. Is AOS a different kind of playstyle for Sorc? Is it in a good place for it? What's the playstyle for Sorc, and how would you?
opinion of AOS on Sorc, so I don't want to give a very valid opinion. Uh, I'd actually rather just leave this question to I know you interviewed Yisuni, because he played so well. Like I think whatever his answer was, like I trust him on it. I do have answers from a few other Sorcs, and he talked about it being like a range peel class, and a very much an assassin class. But the class doesn't have very much pressure, is what they've told me. But I trust Yisuni. I know he can give a solid answer on something like that.
Okay. And then for open world GVGs, open world PvP content, etc., the like for PvP and the focus. How do you like Sorc? Is it something that's enjoyable? I know one of the main things people talk about on Sorc is that its long range movement is an issue. Does it struggle from that in open world content? Is it good in open world content, and how do you enjoy it?
So the class is pretty busted anytime people are either chasing you, or anytime that you're engaging a ball and you're causing a disruption. When you're in a position like where I have to chase, like let's say I have to chase a Megu, or I have to chase a Musa or a Mewa, that's where the class struggles, just because our movement and we just don't have it right. Like we're really really good at keeping shards up, in close quarter combat where there's a lot of opponents, but when we're chasing somebody, like we just can't do it. We're too stamina reliant, too stamina heavy. So the class is very, very busted at like picking people off, being able to play like the outskirts, being able to go in, cause havoc, and then leave because we have nightmare. Um, but I don't think it's like I'd say it's busted. I'd say it's strong. As long as you don't have to chase somebody, it's strong.
As long as you don't have to chase it strong.
As long as I'm not chasing somebody, yeah, I'm pretty we're pretty good. So
All right. And then moving into PvE, I had this broken up for low tier, mid tier, and high tier. Um, how is it in PvE? And between the differences, if somebody was wanting to start fresh on an account, do you think it's something that they can viably grind the lowest end spots like polys, Fogans, centaurs? Moving up into mid tier would be like Kron Castle, orcs, imps, sonals, and then moving into the upper tiers like Olins, Ash, and Crypt of Rusting Thoughts. How is Sork in those various tiers?
Yeah, so Sorc low and mid tier is awful. It's not good. It's not enjoyable. It's fine. I guess you'd consider Sakurai mid tier, huh? It's fine at like any of the end game spots. Like if you Sakurai, Olin's, um, Underground Gyfin, uh, Hex is fine. But it's a very average grinder. It's not a. There are better options. It is higher APM. If you plan on doing well at those classes or at least keeping up with classes who do really well as far as like trash loot goes and money per hour, but it's not a class you want to grind like polys with. It's horrible. It's not
Okay.
enjoyable at all.
I assume a lot of that's due to the movement issues with it.
Yeah, well, the skill you're probably gonna end up using when you're grinding polys is violation, and violation uses stamina. So
Oh, okay.
pack to pack movement is just terrible.
Yeah, that would make sense. All right, moving from PvE into 3v3 tournaments. This is specifically AOAs. For both trials and uncapped, how would you rate Sork for an AOA class?
Sort equal gear. Sorc is really strong on AOA. Uh, unless your team doesn't have a grab. If your team doesn't have a reliable grab and you're fighting a team comp that's full SA, Sorc's gonna struggle. It's the same thing with AOS. You just put this class into a position where like all it's able to do is trade, and one mistake causes the class to be grabbed or just out traded. So or out pressured, I should say.
All
As
right.
far as uncapped goes, though, I think it's the same thing. Like if you're Sorc and you're fighting a class like a warrior or a Valk and they're Q blocking and they outgear you, you're not gonna be able to break their block. But other than that, in most cases, Sorc does really well with gear. So
Okay. And then moving into 1v1s, do you like to use it for 1v1s in like BA or open world DFS? Is this something that's reliable? Does it have a lot of class matchups that are in favor or not in favor of the class? What's it like in 1v1s?
it's weird now, right? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Sorc 1v1s, in my opinion, are really boring. I'm not on a level like I'm gonna bring up Yisuni again just because you interviewed him.
Hmm.
Like Yisuni, where I really enjoy or do like niche things for 1v1s or like I'm so like dialed in where I enjoy that kind of stuff. So, but I do think for like equal gear, equal settings, Sorc's really strong for 1v1s. Like I genuinely enjoy dueling warriors and dueling Valks and shit like that with trial gear. When it's uncapped though, it's a little different. Uh just because if you can't trade them and we don't have a grab, like we're just put into this position where we're just we're kind of just sitting ducks, like we're just waiting for a mistake to happen. You know what I mean? Uh
Hmm.
and if a mistake doesn't happen, then eventually we're gonna get out traded. So Sorc excels at doing damage and trading, and if we're not able to do enough to keep our stamina up or our shards up and stuff like that, like we're just gonna be out of the fight. So that's just the way it works. And when you have classes like Mayu that can stay far away from you, or even like a Suck Sage is really strong. If you're fighting a Suck Sage that just out trades you every time they come out, like it's just yeah.
A trade
But
class that can't outtrade a lot of things. I mean, that would make
It's
sense.
a it's a wei it's a weird thing because Sorc does so well with gear,
Hmm.
but without a grab and when you have classes that can just stay stationary for so long, like, it just I don't know, it's just so sleeper.
Okay. um Moving from the 1v1s and talking about the parts of it that are strong and the parts of it that are weak, what would you do to Awakening Sorc to put it in a good spot? So our goal is to obviously keep classes from being broken and overpowered. If you had to give and take something from Sorc to put it into a really good spot to both play and fight against, what would you do to the class?
So I was actually just talking to Spirit of the Sun about, like, what specific things we could do to Sorceress to change it, and I think he's sending in something for Nurse or whatever to PA. I think the problem, with Sorc and with the meta right now is that we have a lot of classes that are just way too protected. And because these other classes are protected, then Sorc has also become very, very protected, right? Like they didn't just buff one or two classes; they pretty much buffed everybody with more protection. And that's why Sorc is such a strong class because not only does it have a lot of SA damage, it also has consistent iframes pretty much all the time, anytime they want. Uh, I think for specific nerfs to Sorc, I would take Soul Reaper, I would make it a frontal, and I would allow us to mouse move it. And then I would also force Nightmare, to consume stamina when you move it. Um, but I think, like, just nerfing Sorc isn't really viable. I think every class has to get, like, some kinda nerf to protection. I think we're looking at, like, removing, like, 1 to 2 SAs to, like, every class or rotating SAs into frontal guards or something of that sort. Like, I don't think protection is just an issue because of Sorc. Like, I think it needs to be nerfed across the board. So
Okay.
but if I were to pick, Nightmare is annoying. Fighting other sorts who just sit in Nightmare is annoying.
Hmm.
And I think if you can force like stamina to be consumed while a sorceress is moving Nightmare, I think that'd be huge, right? Puts them in a really bad spot. Uh, and then and then also giving us a movable frontal guard. So and removing an SA. I think that'd be really, really huge. Would help with our trade damage.
All right. And one of the big things that I've advocated for when it comes to class reworks, especially with like something with the warrior buffs recently, someone's like, well, warrior's still not going to be meta. And this is the same thing with like give and takes from classes like Sorc and other of, well, we need to continue buffing these classes. And I would disagree. And I think that we need to do what you said and remove some things from a lot of classes instead, remove a lot of protections, to make it so that there's more outplay potential between players and less so of just either grabbing somebody or instantly blowing them up as the current meta is. So I agree 100% with you on something like that for a give and take on Sorc, and then you could then look at other classes to do this global nerf in a ways to put it on a much more fun playing field because it feels really really good when you outplay people on classes. I've played a few classes and it doesn't feel nearly as fun on something like Awakened Musa or Suckserker because you're just permanent SA and you rely upon some sort of cheese mechanic to beat somebody rather than other classes that might be more skillful. Um, so that's a different thing than what Yisuni said in his interview for how to change it. But I think they're both good. It's interesting to see how a lot of players will have differing opinions on how to change their class to better the game. But moving from, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that with sorcerers, like, there's a lot of things that you can do to change it, and there's a lot of things you can do to nerf it. Like, another option you could do is not touch Nightmare at all, and then just nerf the Noose Magnet skill. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Hmm.
just a lot of things because they did. I don't know if you knew this, but they nerfed our leap, right? So we no longer regen stamina when we use leap. Uh, and then what do they do? Like a month later, they gave us a Magnet skill that then gives us 40 shards back on. All we have to do is hit somebody with it.
And it's
So
SA,
like
correct?
yeah, and it's SA, and it gives us HP back, and it does a lot of damage. So it's like this weird thing, like where they do a nerf to a class, and I know a lot of Sorks and KR cried, and it didn't get the nerf that it was supposed to get, but they give a nerf to a class, and then next thing you know, like we're getting a buff that just pampers that, right? Like I can cast this SA ability that regens my stamina, gives me full shards back, and does damage. Like it's just crazy, and I can cancel it anytime I want with an iframe. So like I just think that there just needs to be protection nerfs on the class. Uh, and I also I guess something else I should say is that they need to spread damage around in all classes. Like I think awakening classes are too heavily like their damage is too heavy in their awakening kit. Like we have a C swap for a reason, right? Like I think
Hmm.
damage needs to be spread evenly between like awakening and pre-awakening, to add a little more variety to what's going on in a fight and to give more skill expression. So
All right, and then moving from the changes into matchups, what classes in Awakening Sorc do you see as a free kill, and what classes do you try to shy away from? And this can be in 1v1s or group content.
So I don't think it's necessarily that we shy away from any classes. I'm gonna start with the worst matchups first, and then I'll go into best matchups after. For worst matchups, Warrior and Valk, are pretty bad for Sorc. Just because they have a Q block and they can just sit in SA Q block for forever, pretty much for the Algiris. Uh, Hashashin is really, really, really OP against us, just because they have such good movement and they have a grab. Um, and then Succession Nova. I think that one kind of speaks for itself.
All right. And then for classes that you do really, really well against, what classes are they, and any sort of insight on why you think these classes are a much easier matchup for Sorc?
So best matchups is pretty simple. Other Sorcs, and 9 times out of 10, most Sorcs don't know either how to trade very well, or they make mistakes that are easy to capitalize on, such as sitting a nightmare too long, or holding a block too long. Uh, Tamer, even though with the recent bust for Suck Tamer, it's kind of a struggle, but Awakening Tamer is not that hard of a matchup. It's pretty easy for me to SA trade. Awakening Zerk, as long as they try to pressure me, as long as I can fight like a Awakening Zerk in the pocket, it's fine.
Okay. Um, and then moving on to the most important question for the
Oh,
interview,
and Awakening Ninja. I apologize. And Awakening Ninja.
Awakening Ninja. Okay.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the most important question of the interview, what is your favorite costume for Sorc? If you had to pick one to run it, what would it be?
I don't like any of the Sorc outfits, man. I've bought all of them. I've had all of them. Uh, the outfits that I normally rock are the summer outfits, so like the Coco outfit, the ones that aren't like class specific
Hmm.
or character specific. So, they need to give Sorc something with a cloak, something like a Reaper. I don't know why we don't have that kind of fit yet, bro. Less bikini armor.
Yeah, Yisuni said the exact same thing. He goes, "We have this Grim Reaper scythe and this edgy vibe and spells and animations, and yet all we get is cutesy little outfits and bikini armor. Let me get something cool like a cloak and Grim Reaper outfit." So,
Exactly. What is this nonsense? Where I'm going into battle in a bikini? Like, come on, bro. Relax.
give me something cool. Yeah, I
Yeah, you want me to role play? Let me role play. And yeah, I make montages, man. That's all I care about. So,
make the
as long as
montages.
I want the class to stay strong. I'm not gonna lie to you. I want it to stay in a good spot. I want it to keep getting buffed.
I think Sorc is definitely one of the best montage clip classes, and that's probably because of the 1vx nature of it. Um, so it's we love the montages, we love the content. If you would like to see more montages or content from Zachary, he does stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on his Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Zachary. I'll have that in the description. And if you want to catch any of his awesome montages, which I've seen before, you can catch him on YouTube as well under the same username. Otherwise, thank you for interviewing with me today, Zachary. A lot more insightful information, a different POV, and a couple of the questions too. And bringing in the feedback from other players you talk to is great. It gives a well-rounded, it gives a community approach to it. So I thank you for that, and thank you for doing the interview with me today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. And that will conclude our Awakening Sorc interviews with Yisuni and Zachary. Thank you to both of them for once again interviewing with me today. And if you would like to check out both of their social media content below, it'll be in the description. If you would like to catch me live, you can find me on twitch.tv/Johnny5. I am live every Friday night for the Node War podcast at 11:15 EST. And I'm also going live every Sunday before Node War. So if you'd like to catch me live, find me at those 2 times and sporadically throughout the week. Otherwise, thank you once again for joining in, tuning in, and watching the video. I hope you had a good time. Otherwise, I'll see all of you later.